on America.
The media said what? Ha 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 ha.
Dig on America.
You are fake news.
Last call. Last call. Last call. Last call.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Last Call with your host, Lourin Hubbard. And joining me this week is my co-host, Brent. Brent, how's it going?
It's going. Another lovely week of raising a puppy in the books. So yeah, going good.
Nice. I want to start out the show by thanking everybody who's following us on Twitch and YouTube. And if you have not followed the show, what are you waiting for? We're bringing you another wonderful candidate today because we are in crunch time. We are getting close here. November 8th is right around the corner. I think it's like literally, 10 days away? We're 10 days away from midterm elections. Nine days as of right now away from midterm elections. So John Lira is in the studio today, joining us this week from Texas, he's running for Congress in Texas 23rd District. And Texas is always an interesting one, and I'm glad that we have somebody here to talk Texas politics to us, because as a native Californian, some Texas things I don't quite get. So I hope John's able to break that down for us. Today, by the way, I don't know if you guys could see, but I'm repping my Fresno State because we had a huge come from behind win against San Diego State, which is a rival of ours, and I have a couple friends down in San Diego. So in your face, next time I see you, we're gonna settle up on some money here. But
you're gonna bring up football with somebody from Texas?
Absolutely.
I mean,
I have my team in the back, and they're the USA Conference champions right here. So I'll talk football.
Yeah. I went to LSU. He's from Texas, and you're going to bring up football.
Well, that's America's pastime. Unless you're Carrie Lake, and she said the NFL can blank off. I don't know if you, but John, welcome to the show.
It is an absolute pleasure to be here, Lourin and Brent. Dig on America, Last Call. Big fan of the show, so I'm glad that we finally were able to connect and communicate and get on here and have a conversation.
Yes, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about Texas's 23rd congressional district, if you will. I know Texas is a large state. Where is the 23rd district, and what can you kind of tell us about the people there?
Well, Texas 23 is the biggest, baddest congressional district in Texas. It starts in San Antonio and shoots all the way west to El Paso. So one end of my district and to the other is 8 hours away. 29 total counties. We have 820 miles of Texas-Mexico border. Gents, if this district was a state, it would be the 25th biggest state in our country. And it is at the epicenter at some of the nation's biggest challenges, but also at the forefront of some of our biggest opportunities as well.
Wow.
That's a stat. 25th largest state. If the district was, that's.
I can't even fathom, first of all, that 8 hours between one end to the other.
Yeah, I'm thinking a Cessna 185 is important right about now to get around.
How have you been able to connect with the people in that district?
A Lamborghini.
So I started early and often. That's the way. I mean, I got into this race way back in May 2021 because of the size and the magnitude and the resources that we were going to need to approach this district. This district has regions. I mean, it has 2 time zones. El Paso was in mountain time. And the only way that you can be present and kind of build the relationships that you're going to need in this district enough to win it and to hold it once you do is relationships, relationships, relationships. I have constantly been reaching out to elected leaders, to community activists, community leaders, Democratic leaders, and the general public. Ever since jumping in this race, we launched a boots on the ground tour that took us to all 29 counties. But in reality, we circled the district about 3 or 4 times during that tour. And this is West Texas. You're not going to Zoom it in. You're not going to call it in. You've got to put boots on the ground out here. And that's what we've been doing since day one.
Right on. John, I wonder if you could kind of tell us a little bit about what made you want to hop into this race. And I know we were talking offline earlier about kind of a third like candidate that's hopped in there. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that as well.
Well, I could tell you a couple of things that have motivated my entry into this race, and what an honor it is to be elected to enter the arena. And again, the biggest and baddest congressional district we have in Texas, against a fellow veteran, Tony Gonzalez, a fellow Hispanic veteran, Tony Gonzalez. But one is a continuation of service. This was a seed that was planted in me at the age of 17 when I raised my hand to enlist in the United States Marine Corps. In 11 and a half years, I was deployed to foreign battlefields, to Iraq twice. They gave me a job as an intel analyst in the Marines, and my whole job was to make sure that decision makers had the best information possible so that they can make the best decisions possible. Well, I knew that this had value in government, and not just military commanders on the battlefield, but also some of our elected leaders here in America. So I wanted to transition. I used my GI Bill to transition from a Marine intelligence analyst to a student of political science. I got a degree at, ultimately worked my way to a master's degree at Carnegie Mellon, and went to Washington, D.C. to serve in the front lines of public policy. While there, I served at AmeriCorps headquarters. So I was using the power of national service to help veterans and military families transition. From there, I went to the U.S. Small Business Administration, where I was empowering veterans in a completely different way, helping them to become entrepreneurs and small business owners. And then finally, I was on this wonderful research commission created by Senator John McCain and Jack Reed on service and how we can build not only an ethos of service within our America's youth, but pathways to service, not only in the military, but in local nonprofits and in state, local, national government as well. So, the Marines taught me to always want to serve in the most challenging environments where leadership is needed the most, and also not to leave anyone behind. So each one of these skills was just me looking for a way to serve one of my communities that I care about and I felt part of at the very forefront of the challenges that they were facing. Texas 23 is a very vast district and it's facing significant problems. We've seen a lot of the images that are coming out of our border. That's in Texas 23. We saw a couple of months back the terrible shooting at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas. That's in Texas 23. We still have some of the poorest zip codes in the country. But on that note, we have 5 ports of entry. So we pass through tremendous amounts of binational goods. We're blasting people into outer space in Van Horn, Texas with Blue Origin and Jeff Bezos. He has 1 launch pad there now. He wants to build 8 of them there. So there's a lot of opportunity here. Most of the counties are rural. They need a rural champion. They need somebody who's going to focus on a rural revival. And I think that there's plenty of ways to do it. This district also was one of the most energy producing districts in the nation. And I'm not just talking oil, but also wind, solar, and even natural gas. So what happens in Texas 23 not only impacts us Texans, but impacts the nation, in some cases, our international affairs as well. So they need somebody who's going to lead at the forefront of these issues. And I think that I can do it better than the guys in there now because he's not doing a great job of it.
Well,
I want to jump in. I want to jump in because you brought up you got in last May because you knew that it was going to take a lot of time to develop the relationships, the boots, the handshaking, the everything else to really get out there. How did all that change after the Uvalde shooting? How did, because that was one of those moments in history where people decide they're going to run or one of the, being in the middle of the race. What did having that tragedy strike do to you as a candidate and for your candidate? Obviously it changed something in you. It changed everyone in that area from what I've been told, having it strike so close to home. But how did that, you know, now being able to look back, how did that impact, or do you think it did impact what you were talking about, who you were talking to, as far as your run, and did that affect you?
Oh, well, thank you for that question. And absolutely, absolutely, it did. I tell you, we were here doing, doing call time, and you know, we heard of the first report. I started getting texts from my friends. Hey, there's an active shooter. There's reports of an active shooter. You know, we went to lunch. We came back. We had an update. There was 2 that had been killed. We settled back into some work, and then the next update came about an hour later. That update was 14 had been killed. We knew right there we had to stop what we were doing. We didn't know what we can do to help, but we know that we had to do something, and campaigning wasn't the right thing to do at that point. But what we did do is we headed down to Uvalde. You know, we were there. We didn't want to interrupt with the parents or get in the way, but we just wanted to be there to show a sign of support and solidarity, you know, to grieve, to try to understand. You know, we were at the Civic Center that night as the families waited, you know, to have their, you know, on the update of their child, you know. It was very tense, you know, it was very quiet. Nobody was saying much, but everybody, you can tell everybody was wearing their emotions on their sleeves. You can tell that it was a very heavy, you know. And then I went back for the vigil, and then I went back for the memorial, then I went back for the president, then I went back for the march, then I went back for the rally, then I went back for the voter registration. So this has had a tremendous impact on this race. I mean, it brought a groundswell of national attention to the district, to the race, a lot of negative attention to my opponent, Tony Gonzalez, because his past tweets of bragging about his NRA, you know, questionnaire score, and posting tweets about no liberal gun grabs on my watch, and I just voted against 2 gun safety measures, you know, it all came flooding back to him. And then the next day, you know, he had 2 embarrassing interviews where one, he couldn't even answer a basic question of why an 18-year-old needs a automatic weapon. And then the other one where he famously told Gail King, you know, not today, you know, I don't want to talk about it today. I don't want to talk about my past record today, you know. So time after time, the incumbent has told the families of Uvalde, the community of Uvalde, not today. But the total impact of this race it was a total sea change. I mean, it was a weird dynamic to where, you know, all of a sudden our Twitter verse was spiraling through the roof. Somebody had, you know, did research and say, hey, well, this is the guy who's actually taking on Tony Gonzalez, and oh my God, he's a Marine, and wow, he has a shot of winning. Hey, this race is in play. Let's support this guy. And as you could imagine, our national profile grew quite significantly. You know, so I feel an eternal, you know, debt to those families. You know, in a campaign, nobody ever knows what the peaks and valleys are going to be. Nobody ever knows what the surprise of that campaign or of that race will be for that cycle. And nobody asked for this one. You know, it was cast upon us as a community. And, you know, we got through it together. We grieved together. You know, some of the parents still have not taken time to grieve because they've become activists, and they've continued to call for change nonstop, you know, to increase the age to buy a weapon from 18 to 21. It's a simple request, and it's bipartisan. I've heard it myself at the doors. Republicans, conservatives support that. But it was a very weird dynamic. Again, I didn't expect, you know, to gain national attention, you know, by a tragedy like this. But because of that, I am committed. I'm committed to stand by the families. On election night, we will be in Uvalde, because the first minute that I'm congressman-elect, I want to be right there with them, working on what could potentially be my first bill that I introduce as a member of Congress, to be a gun safety, gun violence prevention bill in response to those families in Uvalde.
Wow. I mean, yeah, that's pretty powerful. I remember seeing it. I had actually picked up my daughter early from school, and we were getting ice cream when that was happening. And I was thinking to myself, what would I do? And I would totally be that parent that just went in, like the police were standing around doing nothing. Sorry, they weren't doing anything. And that mom broke in herself and went and got her child. That would be me. I would have gone in to get my child out. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this 3-person race that's developing And if you could kind of break down this from Texas, this Ross Perot-esque character here that's making this a three-person race, and how that split is really kind of an advantage to you from my understanding, and how this puts this seat really in play.
Well, I'll just start off by saying that this is Texas 23, and Texas 23 is always in play. Since its creation, it was drawn a 50-50 split. They wanted the Democrat and the Republican candidate for U.S. House to fight this one out every year. They didn't want any safe. Now, this time after redistricting, again, they shaded it a couple of shades red, but they left it full within reach. You know, they left it about R+5 between R+7, still single digits, and the only opportunity, the best opportunity for a Democratic flip from red to blue in Texas this year. So again, traditionally, traditionally up for grabs. I know that Will Hurd was the first U.S. representative to hold this seat for longer than one term in a long time, because before that it would flip. This race usually bucks polling. The candidate with the most money generally doesn't end up winning this race. It's about, like, again, how you get out there, get boots on the ground, and the relationships that you cultivate in this race. But all that to say, after redistricting, they shaded it again from about a 5 percentage point to a 5+7. But enter Mr. Frank Lopez Jr. as an independent in this race. Now, he's going to have a significant impact because of who he is. He's a former Republican county chair in Val Verde County, which has Del Rio in it. He's a former Republican Party committeeman, so he's held rank in the Texas Republican Party. He's a former retired Border Patrol agent. Gonzalez, if you know anything about him, he's a one-trick pony. It's all about the border, Biden and the border, Biden and the border. It's on repeat. Well, Frank Lopez is an actual retired Border Patrol agent, you know, so it's going to be, they're kind of fighting over that Border Patrol support. But nonetheless, we did a poll way back in July, and Mr. Frank Lopez was already polling at 7%. We just did another poll. He's grown to 11%. So this is significant. If he goes to 50, wow. We're in my district where I'm at right now, a Democratic base of 45%. It won't get me there in a 2-person race. But in a 3-person race, it gets me there with Frank Lopez just getting 2 or 3 more percent. Yeah. It gets me there. So again, we've launched a Boots on the Ground tour early in March after I won my primary outright, and we've been in the district and cultivating the relationships. But in this particular aspect, the entrance of Frank Lopez and how much he can take of that very far right vote from Gonzalez, which he's going to need, could mean all the difference in the world for us.
So Gonzalez is the incumbent, and the independent is actually to the right of the incumbent, but pretending to be in the middle. What did Gonzalez do to make him not MAGA enough for somebody to the right to go to the left to try? I'm trying to do the political gymnastics here.
Sorry, I had to let my dog out. It's crazy.
It's okay.
All right. Oh, I'll tell you, there's plenty. I mean, there's plenty that they want. I mean, that's his biggest mistake, is that he did not consolidate the Republicans around him. With one of his first votes, and again, to his credit, was he certified the election. So again, he had Trump's endorsement, and that's the main. And then Republicans and far right Republicans see that as the reason why he won, that they swept him into office in a very close primary, and then again in a very competitive general. And they felt betrayed. They felt that he turned his back on Trump. But then again, he voted for a couple of other things as well. He voted for the January 6th committee, but not the commission. No, he voted for the commission, which was an external body, but not the committee, which is the one we're seeing now. But again, further turning against Trump. The bill that he did vote for, the Safer Communities Act, which was a good gun safety bill, very watered down by Republicans to be the bare minimum that they'd accept, but a good bill nonetheless. He voted for that, to his credit, and they see that as a complete affront against the Second Amendment out here. You know, so he's been censured by 3 Republican county parties out here for those votes, and they kind of use the moniker of a rhino against him, and Frank Lopez is kind of running as the American first patriot, the alternative the Patriots alternative to the Rhino Tony Gonzalez. So
okay, I'm going to ask one more question and then I'll let Lauren go because I'm just curious on the history of this and hearing it. This is the first time I've ever heard of a 3-person race in a congressional district, all Latino.
all Latino veterans as well, actually.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just, just kind of, I mean, I don't know why that matters. I'm just hearing it, but you've got a extreme conservative, a conservative, and a liberal, all veterans. It's interesting.
I just think that's speaks to the span of that liberals are also part of our armed forces and they make up a portion, and that there's Latinos are not a monolith, and I wish the Democratic Party would understand that. And some of our messaging has not been great, but we're not a monolith, and that we need to start talking to people about issues.
You mean the Democrats messaging that we don't have to talk to Black people or Latinos because they just automatically vote for us? And you mean that messaging, Lauren?
Yes, that messaging.
Okay.
I will.
We're trying to change that, but
well, so I do want to get to, because of because of the incumbent in this race, and his discussions about the border. Well, he's always trying to tie Biden to the border and border security. And I was watching this week. Last week we had Marisa Wood on, and she had a debate with Kevin McCarthy on Wednesday. And Kevin McCarthy, of course, is now the House Minority Leader, and he's doing the same thing, talking about fentanyl coming across the border in droves. And there's all these bad people that are coming across the border. John, what is your kind of your policy on border security, and what does that look like when we have? If you could talk to us a little bit about what you think we need to do as far as reform for immigration here in America.
Yeah. Well, I'll be the first to admit that it is a crisis down there. It's a humanitarian crisis. What we have down there. The situation is unbefitting a nation of immigrants like ourselves, a nation that is born of immigrants, but a nation that should continue to thrive from immigrants and be enriched by immigrants. It's a big ball of yarn that needs to be untangled. I see it as 5 issues specifically. One is our outdated asylum and refugee laws. I mean, they were written so long ago that they never imagined 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 people caravans coming in all at once. We don't have the infrastructure to process. We're pulling Border Patrol off the line so that they can come in and be clerical processing clerks. And again, it's a waste of resources. It would be like bringing in the Marines and putting them in there to do, kitchen duty or something like that. You want them out there doing their job, and we want to invest properly. So we definitely need asylum reform issues. But then again, these folks have a legitimate claim. They know our laws, and they probably know our laws better than Americans do, these asylum seekers, so they're legally allowed to be here once they set foot and once they have a setting for their hearing. And we've got to respect that. They should not be used as human props and being sent all over the country just to have media chasing them. That's immoral. That's unethical. That's horrible. That's wrong. But the second one is just our regular pathways to citizenship. We have people that apply for citizenship and don't hear a response back for the next 10 years. We have people that have been here for 10 years and they're hardworking Americans and everything but name, our dreamers, so we need these pathways for our dreamers. So that's one of the issues that we have to tackle as well. Then there's the regular commerce, the seasonal workers that can enrich Texas 23. I've talked to the farmers. I've talked to ranchers. I've talked to warehouse owners saying, why are we turning them around? Send them my way. I will house them. I will clothe them. We can feed them. We can pay them. We can tax them, but we need them desperately out here, and they can be part of our economic revival. They're not a drag on our country. We should welcome them in as seasonal workers, to again kickstart our economy. 2 more things is just our free flow of goods. We have 5 ports of entry in this district, and they facilitate billions of dollars of binational trade. We want to invest in them. Mexico is building super highways to our ports of entry, and what do they get when they cross? Little 2-lane highways. So we got to make sure there's a great ports to plains initiative, but we got to make sure that we invest in our ports of entry, and that plays right into my final kind of issue that I see here is just the security part, right? It is a little bit of the smart borders with the technology to detect illegal crossings, but also is to prevent human smuggling, drug smuggling, weapons smuggling across our border. So those elements right there, some Democrats might say we want all in comprehensive. I'm saying let's make move on any one of those issues immediately because they're all at play here. One of my longer term ones I would love to see come together, a U.S. border commission. This is a commission that could take about 3 years of scientists, demographers, the religious community, refugee, local leaders, but a task force of individuals, of Americans that can analyze the issue in depth and put forth American solutions for Congress and the president, not left solutions, not right solutions. American solutions are needed for the U.S. border. It should be a bipartisan issue. And again, border states, they have different needs than any other states in the nation, and they need to be recognized on the floor of the House chamber.
Yeah, and to your point, it's always the fact that the national security remarks that come up from Republicans on this issue, when it is so clear to me that the majority of folks can get into this country legally and then just overstay a visa, or in case of the 9/11 hijackers come into the country via a flight and then just disappear. I've never understood the fact that there was Iran is slipping people into these caravans, and that's how they're getting terrorists into the country. I've never understood that. But to your point, that's exactly the thing, the criticism that folks where I'm from, in Kevin McCarthy's district, that are the criticisms of Kevin, who used to be for the exact same things that you just said. Kevin McCarthy used to have that stance 10, 15 years ago, and it's just disappeared. And it's a wonder. Our agriculture here is very dependent on migrant workers that follow the crops through the seasons up. And so I don't know why we are making it so hard on
it's scapegoating. Yeah, no, it's complete scapegoating. I mean, whenever Greg Abbott, whenever the grid shuts down on us, well, I'm not the problem. Look at all the brown people that are crossing the border, the southern border. Don't look at me. These are folks here. They like to describe it as an invasion. I was actually part of an invasion. I was there in 2003 with the 1st Marine Division as we invaded Iraq. I had airplanes above me. I had tanks behind me. I had artillery. This is a humanitarian crisis. These are men and women and children that are seeking humanitarian assistance. So to label them again as some sort of terrorist, it demeans the communities, right? What business is going to want to open up a shop in Del Rio, open up a warehouse in Eagle Pass now because Congressman Tony Gonzalez is telling them that it's a terrorist safe haven, and all they're doing is transporting fentanyl, and these your life is at risk because the women and children are coming across the border there. It diminishes, it devalues, and it demeans our border communities when they push rhetoric like that.
Okay, Mar-a-Lago, who is notorious for hiring undocumented workers. Just saying.
Yeah, I have a two-parter border question, and I may have totally inaccurate information, and I know the facts, but I have read reporting that right now the gun problem on the border is our gun laws are so lax here that they're illegally smuggling the guns into Mexico to then use for crimes there and or crimes trying to bring drugs back into the United States. Is that factually accurate information that you're seeing or hearing?
I'd agree with that statement. There's probably more American firearms being smuggled into Mexico than Mexico has tougher gun laws. Yes, we have more liberal gun laws here. So absolutely, that's absolutely the case. We get a lot of the drugs, a lot of the narcotics, a lot of the human trafficking out of Mexico, but absolutely it's the reverse flow for firearms.
But they're using American guns to do that drug trafficking and human trafficking. If we can fix the gun laws here and they don't have access to the weapons to steal the people or use it. Like, I mean, it seems like it'd be common sense that down there they would want to know who's buying the guns and where they're going, and that they're accounted for. If they're so concerned about those other topics, if it's drug dealers with guns are bringing fentanyl over, where'd they get the gun? Oh, they bought it in Texas, went over, loaded up with fentanyl, and came back and have a gun to use against somebody that's trying to stop them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And it kind of speaks to a bigger problem, is that we need some support and some partners on the other side of the border as well. We need Mexico to step up as well. This is a binational issue. It's just not an American problem. We need our friends south of the border, our compatriots, our partners over there to lend us a hand and step up and kind of help us with these security concerns. This is an illicit network of coyotes, and as long as it remains lucrative for them to keep caravanning folks and telling them, if you give me $3,000, President Biden said you can get to the border, but you got to hurry up and I can get you there. These people are being manipulated, they're being taken advantage of also. And once they're on the trail where their life and everything, their safety, their health are subject to a bunch of cartel runners, so we definitely have to break up that illicit network. But to your broader point, you're absolutely right. It is illegal to transport guns from U.S. into Mexico, but doesn't mean that it ain't happening. And we've seen how porous our borders are. We think that everything's coming from north to south. From south to north. You're probably right that there's probably truckloads of undetected. It could be military sea bags full of weapons that are going back from north to south. Don't doubt that.
So here's this one. Just because seem to know all the stats on your district. I believe you said you have 850 miles of border in Texas 23. How many miles of that has Trump fence, and how many miles of Trump fence have fallen over in Texas 23?
I think we have a small stretch of what they call the Bannon fence in El Paso, and I think it's about 1 mile, maybe 2 miles. It was a very high part of the mountain, and everybody just kind of looks at it and laughs at it because nobody would cross at that part of the mountain as well. No,
I'm fat and out of shape, and I can walk a mile around that.
Yeah, no, and a lot of it focused on a lot of our borders a little bit further south, in Laredo, McAllen, Brownsville, around those areas. So they didn't put too much up here in Texas 23. But again, we do have some crossing points where they're just shallow enough to be dangerous. They're just and we don't want any human beings losing their lives crossing this river. Imagine to make it a 2,000 mile journey from your homeland across maybe 2 countries, subject to the weather, subject to harm of criminals and bullies. And then you see the river and you see America right there. And then you get swept away by the river because that current is too strong, because you didn't pick the right place to cross, or there wasn't an appropriate entry or orderly way to get in. And through my district traveled that truck that had the 53 migrants found dead here. And again, we're a nation of immigrants. Nobody wants that. We must have an orderly and safe process. If you don't apply for asylum and that's not the right way, then apply for a work visa, a temporary work visa, and help add to our economy. And you can send some resources back, and then you can come back the next season, and maybe you can rack up some hours to build towards a citizenship. But there's plenty of ideas here that we don't have to treat them and scapegoat asylum seekers and migrants as criminals.
Yeah, and to the point that we had Dino in the chat reach out and say, like, we don't hear the same kind of comments about the northern border when it is just as easy. I think that actually the most of the stories I hear from the northern border are about Americans going into Canada to get prescriptions and that whole thing to come back down in here. But it's to me, it's an asinine argument of saying we need border security and have it only focus on the southern border, when just to the point, I could just fly to Canada and cross over from there, or I could fly into the United States and overstay the visa, and it has nothing to do. None of the solutions put forth by Republicans address that. It is just brown people come from the South, So we want to stop that.
It's their
It is-
scapegoat. It's this how they scapegoat. They profit politically from a broken border to obstruct any progress towards fixing that. They claim to love the border patrol. If they love the border patrol, then make it easier, make more legal pathways so they don't have to deal with illegal immigration. Make more legal pathways so people could prefer to choose the legal route. That there's no ambiguity around it, that we do have a safe, orderly, effective, transparent process. But they profit politically, and they politically scapegoat these poor folks.
Absolutely.
I feel like if we put a footbridge in at 2 or 3 of the primary points where people are trying to swim across and everything else, and literally just put up a processing station on our side, then most of the people that enter illegally and run would go to that funnel point because they would be able to be processed. And then the Border Patrol could look to the left and the right of the footbridge and go, now, why is that person swimming and not going on the footbridge? That's somebody we got to talk to.
Right.
Like it would, it would totally, and this whole thing of illegal crossings and how many people are criminals and how many are moving drugs and everything. Like if you gave a way that people could, move, physically walk to, where, yes, it still has some sort of containment. It's a processing. They take the information. If you don't have it, they are able to give you a place, short-term place to stay while they find out who you are. It would make everybody else that isn't, using that. I understand you're innocent until proven guilty, but still it would be suspect if you're 500 feet away from a way to walk over versus why are you swimming? But again, that's in the comprehensive reform, and that's what Republicans don't want, because you're absolutely right. Because if we fix this issue, they lose it politically. They no longer have a way to say, oh, the Democrats are doing this, and we're going to stop it.
Well, yeah, and I'm convinced they don't want to fix it because a lot of the talking points on the right kind of mirror, what we've heard from like white supremacists like David Duke, of they're coming to take your culture, and that is a dog whistle and a half. Has nothing to do with the legal process of immigration. When someone says they're coming for your culture,
Yeah, and I tell you, they love to blame Joe Biden. Again, I would call on Joe Biden to do more, the administration to do more. I would love, again, they want him, the Republicans say, come down here, come to the border. Listen, I have a better chance to get President Biden to the border than Tony Gonzalez does. All right. But the thing is that the governors of Texas, starting from Rick Perry to the last 8 years of Greg Abbott, have wasted billions and billions and billions of Texas taxpayer dollars on border stunts, on electioneering stunts, where they'll send in the National Guard for a weekend. Greg Abbott has doubled down and launched Operation Lone Star, which has had our National Guard there for going on 2 years, I believe. They just experienced their 4th suicide there last month from a guardsman. So we got to talk about this. They love blaming President Biden. And again, I agree the administration ought to do more, or at least come down here. People feel like there's nothing going on and there's no improvement. But at the same time, look at the Texas governors. They've been wasting, I think that the tally was $30 billion over the last 10 years of Texas taxpayer money going to keep the border broken, essentially. Just photo ops, election year photo ops.
Yeah. To the point that's in the chat, I think of like Republicans like Mark Green, who are from Tennessee, going down to the border. It's like, this is just a photo op. I also think of Tony Gonzalez from the Chargers. So I think of that.
Well, Tony Gonzalez isn't even the only Tony Gonzalez in Congress. There's Anthony Gonzalez, a Republican out of Ohio as well. So There's even two. Tony Gonzalez is in there.
Nice.
There will only be one John Lira
okay.
when I get to comment.
Okay, there will only be one John Lira, but just for fun, what are your thoughts on your one and only Rafael Cruz that represents your state?
Oh my gosh! Well, he's completely peacocking himself for a presidential run right now with his little bus tour or tour. Everybody gets to hurl insults at the guy, which I participated in. I don't know if you've seen the video on Twitter where I tore into him a bit. It was the day after Uvalde, and we knew that right after he left that vigil, he was going to go straight to the NRA convention. So let him hear about that. Let him know how I felt, and let him know that I was challenging Gonzalez, and I'll be knocking on his door once I got to DC. But he's definitely posturing himself. You heard him say it himself. If Trump doesn't run, everybody gets in. He's going to be among the craziest of the crazies. Greg Abbott's going to be in there. DeSantis is going to be in there. It's going to be, if Trump's in there again, it's going to be, it's just complete chaos. So I think that he motivates Democrats again more than he probably motivates Republicans at this point.
Did you see the video of the good liars
he got cucked.
where they went to the Trump rally and handed out Ted Cruz sucks signs? And all the people there that were all Trumpers were like, oh, yeah, we want this sign. Like, they went there. They're like, we can't find common ground on anything, but
except for
we handed out 1,000 of these signs, and they're not laying on the ground. The people took them with them. And I was like, wow. Like, So I'm sorry. I got to get a dig in on the guy whenever I can.
Yeah, showing up at the Yankee Astros game, and getting just murdered.
Yeah.
From people from Texas, like people in Astros jerseys, also giving him stuff. So yeah, Ted Cruz. John, I'm hoping that you would kind of tell us a little bit about your viewpoint, because I know, I have my wife is Cuban and Puerto Rican, and hanging out with her family at this time of year when we get into the holidays. Talking to them, they're very pro-life people. So to me, the ability to access reproductive health is an economic issue. It's economic justice. Do you support women having access to reproductive health care, and what do you think needs to happen? What are you prepared to do as a representative to ensure that women all across the country have access to this care?
Yeah, I'll start by saying I do. I'm a proud pro-choice candidate. I'm a Catholic. I've been hearing the rhetoric, and this has been a tough conversation for me, internally for a long time, up until I became a father. Up until I became a uncle of 4 nieces. I want women to have all options of healthcare on the table, including reproductive healthcare and including abortions, if that's what her partner, her doctor decide is necessary for them. So absolutely right. I think that the Dobbs decision can set back maternity care and reproductive health care in America, generations, decades, when this is a field of practice that we should be leading in. It saddens me that Texas has one of the, pretty much wrote the template of the trigger law that other states are following with some of the strictest. Now it's just an all-out ban, no exceptions. At the very least, have some exceptions. But I would say I've been knocking the doors and kind of hearing the folks and then talking to people on this issue, and there is very much bipartisan disapproval for this in the district. I've heard this from even some very conservative women. This is Texas. It's a land of personal freedom and liberty, and don't tread on me. And Texas women, all Texas women, not just progressive and conservative, Texas women feel that they've been stripped of a right that they formerly had. They know that the women in New Mexico have more rights than them, and they're a bit angry about it. Yes, of course, they've been pushing for this for a while, but now it's the case of the dog that caught the car, right? Now what? So I'm glad to hear that in Texas, women voters are outnumbering male voters. So they have that extra enthusiasm this year to go out and vote for their privacy, for their reproductive freedom, for the conversations that they have between their doctor on any issues relating to maternity care or should be private, should not be the interest of anybody else. So I'm proud to stand with the women of Texas, the women of America, to defend these rights and these freedoms to their bodily autonomy so they can do what they want. It's none of my business how many children they have, and it should be nobody else's. I'm running to keep politics and politicians out of the doctor's office when women have to make those decisions.
Can I jump in? This is a very, very personal subject to me. My wife had a placental abruption at 20 weeks. She was bleeding out. She went into full labor. They gave her an epidural. Her contractions stopped. And then she had a massive bleed. And I had to make the decision because she had lost so much blood and was on painkillers. Couldn't make her own, like she physically was not mentally able to. And so the doctor talked to me and we made the decision to induce labor. And our daughter was born and passed away. But by any definition, it was an abortion. And I've been vocal about it. Mm-hmm. And the thing to me is so many politicians are missing it and you didn't. I made a private medical decision because I'm her husband that, you know, that she could have made as a private medical decision with her doctor. And people are missing the point that with what happened, we're losing privacy in our healthcare, which is another topic that I'm passionate about, but that you're introducing politics in where there should be none. If you don't want an abortion, don't get one. It's no one is coming to give you an abortion. There's no one is pro-abortion.
Exactly.
It's the privacy aspect. I mean, I think it's funny how, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene in all her brilliance is like, I can't tell you if I'm vaccinated because that violates my HIPAA rights. No, it doesn't violate yours. Your doctor can't tell us. You can tell us anything you want. You're saying you don't want to tell us because that's private information, but you're saying Roe should be overturned, which Roe was about privacy, about what happens in your doctor's office is up to you and your doctor. A doctor takes an oath to not do harm. And until we had a president of the United States that had taken an oath to protect and defend the Constitution and then threw that out the window on January 6th, I thought oaths meant something.
Before January 6th, but
you know,
something to me, yeah.
You know, that doctors are not killing babies after they're born, Liz Cheney. They're not killing babies at 8.5 months because that's not a
just
thing
changed their
that's
mind.
happening.
Yeah.
You know, and so the big thing to me is pounding the privacy part because that's what gets the men involved. Because men are like, oh wait, I'm asking my doctor about this subject. I don't want anybody knowing about that.
You don't want anybody to know you're getting keeps with the little blue pills delivered to your door.
I just want to thank you, John, for immediately, you know, talking about the reproductive care aspect, but that it's private and that what was taken was the privacy, which allows the government to affect the reproductive care. But the dominoes are not done now that the government has said you don't have a right to privacy.
Right. Right. And don't believe Republicans when they've always framed it as, oh, well, it's just a states' rights issue. Because we heard Lindsey Graham and he said the silent part out loud, national ban on abortions. So it was never about states' rights. It's always about repealing it, of course, and taking rights, but it was never about states' rights. It was about repealing women's right to choose. So again, we can't trust them. So the second part of your question, what can I plan to do about it? Well, one, we continue to shine the light on it. We try to make, not only maternity care, but some preventative care also. You know, if it's about unwanted pregnancies, you know, let's start to invest in some of that as well. If Republicans don't want abortions, then they better start investing in the foster care. I know Texas has the worst state-run foster care in the nation, so they better step up. But above all, this is something that America should not be last place in maternal care and reproductive health care and having unsafe practices, abortion practices. We should be the safest. We should be transparent. Nobody's calling for more abortions. I think that's one of the most hardest decisions that a woman would have to make with her doctor and with her partner. I'm not calling for them, and I don't want them. But I do respect any person's right to choose what goes on within their body. And that goes the same way for mandates, for the vaccine mandate. We don't know everybody's situation. We don't know the medical condition. We don't know type of reaction. We don't know, and to do a blanket mandate or a blanket ban freaks me out as an American either way.
Exactly. I was the same way. I think if you wanted to get the vaccine, go for it. And to our credit, our governor, Gavin Newsom here, for state employees said, hey, we want to encourage people to get the vaccine. If you do not, as a state worker, you will just have to test regularly. Yeah. And those tests were provided to the employees. They had nothing to be upset about. There was like, my rights. It was none of that. It was like, you could either get it and not have to test, or you could not get it, but you're responsible for testing. And so body autonomy all the way. I'm wondering if you could, I know we have just a few minutes left, and we usually like to do a couple international stories or national stories on the panel. But just one of the things that I heard Kevin McCarthy say in this debate last week was something that I've heard parroted by other Republicans, and I wonder if Tony Gonzalez was one of these Republicans that said that blame inflation, even though it's a global phenomenon right now, on Democrats coming into power in 2021 that just happened to be the start of this inflation trend. What do you say to folks that are, the price of things are going up and increasing? What do you say to people to contrast yourself with your Republican opponents who are, to me, don't really have any answer for inflation? But what do you say to that issue?
I tell those Americans that I hear them loud and clear that it's undeniable that when you have less money, when you're used to a certain budget for your family and things start costing more, and next thing you know, you have less and less of that budget available. That's a serious thing for families, especially those on fixed income like veterans and like seniors. So it's real, absolutely. And I tell them that I'm ready to work nonstop to continue to decrease inflation. And how does that start? That starts by getting back to full employment, getting back our factories back going, getting people into jobs, getting products back on our shelves. Right now, there's still shortages and backlogs of products. Get products back on the shelves. Build domestically. The CHIPS Act, the Semiconductors Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, significant and monumental investments in domestic production. We have a small incorporated town called Sierra Blanca out here, and they found 16 of the world's 17 rare earth minerals. This is stuff like beryllium. It goes into stealth technology, and it goes into computer chips and semiconductors. So my little unincorporated town out here in Hudspeth could potentially boost our domestic production of semiconductors right here in Texas. So we want to invest in those things. We want to reduce the cost of energy. Texas, I mentioned, is one of the biggest energy producing states, and that's not only oil, but that's also wind, that's also solar. We have enough to fuel the country here, but yet we suffered from high electricity, and we suffered from a grid that failed back in February 2021. We suffered from high prices, so that's not doing anything for us down here or the nation. So again, I think the biggest thing and the biggest contrast out here is that we want to invest again in these rural communities. We need a rural economic revival. I think that more opening up the work visa program and letting some of these migrants who might not qualify for asylum or don't meet those qualifications, as long as they're not criminals, send them over to the work visa line, get them working, get them in the farms. Let's just kickstart these industries that we have out here, because again, we have enough to feed the country and to fuel the country right here in Texas 23. So again, I commend some of the bills that the Democrats have passed. When are you going to pass these generational investments, besides when the country had been shut down for 2 years? And we were experiencing still some of that volatility, but now was the right time to invest. Now, do we need huge spending packages going forward? Not necessarily. I think we need to pump the brakes and let's start generating and start doing some of the projects that we have in place through some of the stimuluses and some of the infrastructure and some of the Inflation Reduction Act. But I'm proud of Democrats for some of the bills that President Biden has signed into law to try to directly confront this and lowering energy costs again, getting people into work, getting factories fired up, tractors fired up, electricians laying in line, plumbers laying pipe. So all of that we need out here in rural West Texas. And that aspect, I think Democrats have a lot to say that we've stepped up. And of course, there's going to be some inflation. Our economy is still going through ripples of a shutdown economy, but we just had a great
supply chain
report.
Still a thing. Yeah.
We had a great report, and we're hitting waves right now, but it's stabilizing. And I think that's because of some of the actions that Joe Biden and the Democrats have taken.
Yeah, I think I read a report that IMF that inflation is actually going down. But go ahead, Brent.
Okay, you brought up the fixed income, discussion, Social Security, seniors and veterans. Where do you stand on making adjustments to that? Biden increased, or the Biden administration and as a group did 8.7% increase on Social Security this year, but we all well know that Social Security has not kept up. And that Social Security does not keep up, and that being on Social Security now versus Social Security on 1978 is two different playing fields of living. And I haven't spoken to veterans that are on fixed income from the Veterans Administration, but you being a veteran, you could probably enlighten me. Like, I believe we need to kind of reset the game board on Social Security and figure out a COLA attachment that is more in line with actual cost of living. But what is your experience from the veteran side and knowing more veterans than I do? Is that the same problem for veterans as what I see with the Social Security?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. One is that like veterans, some of the veterans, that receive some sort of, disability that they cannot work, so just like seniors, there's not a side job that they can do. They can't enter the workplace, and that's not like they're unemployed, they have no other source of income. So of course, when they're used to getting a set budget and this much goes to rent, this much goes to, but then again, inflation rises. And again, everything is expensive, to gas, to eggs, to even maybe rent might increase. Well, now they're in trouble. Now, how are they going to make up that shortfall? So absolutely. I think that, it's something that should be measured. I think that there should be triggers in place. If there's a certain increase of inflation beyond a certain measure, 5%, 3%, 10%, whatever the right measure might be, if there's an increase and it kicks in some sort of mechanism that can help fill that gap, maybe it's a slight bump up or something, but I think we can get creative with it. I think the main thing is to keep Social Security payments and assistance and benefits, along with veterans disability and compensation benefits, to keep pace, with inflation, so that they can still survive, that they're not priced out, so that they don't lose, the apartment that they're renting because they no longer can afford that because it increased the next time they redid their contract. So I would look at a lot of creative ways, to increase that. Only when, I think that inflation is going to go down. I'm hoping that we hit our ceiling for inflation. Of course, it's static. It's never going to be in one place for very long. But I think it is on the downward trend, but I do think when inflation does spike and we see that there needs to be some triggers in place that can help those most vulnerable, like our seniors and like our veterans and like those on fixed budgets and pensions, that they can have some relief there, because they'll be put out, if they can't make that payment to the assisted living facility or if they can't make that car payment, how are they going to go to the doctor? So it's a ripple effect. So I think that the broader question is, I think we can be a bit innovative there. A lot of the old solutions are not keeping pace with the reality of our situation and our economic situation. But hopefully recession continues to decline, and things as a market, as an economy, we begin to stabilize. That's the goal.
So, John, I just wanted to get your comments really quick on a news story that we had that happened a couple days ago. And Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, her husband being attacked, and it seems like it's a politically motivated event, as the attacker is posting right-wing stuff on his Facebook and social media, and stated, "Where's Nancy?" When he broke into the home. What are your thoughts on that news story and just the overall state of politics in this country?
Complete disappointment. It's absolute shame. It's horrible. It proves that, rhetoric from elected leaders matters. You know what I mean? When you're calling and painting the other side, the members of different party and leaders of different party as traitors, as terrorists, as, somebody who hates our country, there's folks out there that'll believe that. Those folks out there that will turn that emotion into actions like that. We saw it with Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, a similar attempt. I mean, these are plotted, targeted acts of violence, acts of domestic terrorism against members of government. I think the rhetoric has just gone too far, especially when it comes to election time. It goes way too far, and they hope that they can reel it back in once the elections are over, and there's no putting it back in the bottle. So we've got to be very weary of folks who are willing to act on some of this rhetoric and some of this agitation that we're seeing in some of the darkest corners, political corners of our country. My family was a victim to domestic terrorism. We lost a great uncle in the Oklahoma City bombing of the Mora building. Wow. And, so I take this personally. I take, extremism in the military very personally. I take domestic terrorism and domestic intimidation of elected officials very seriously. We've got to pay attention to who we're electing, folks. We cannot have elect a political party and let a political party take power that governs off of aggression, off of assertion, off of agitation. That is no way to govern. They're going to govern to punish. They're not going to govern to enrich and unite. They're going to govern to punish and divide. That's not the type of leaders we are. That's not who we are as Americans. That's not the Constitution and the values that I swore to uphold as a U.S. Marine. So we continue to shine the light on this. We stand up to this intimidation, just like many of the civil rights leaders stood up to intimidation, just like the farm workers stood up to intimidation. We stand up to it, we call it out, and we elect leaders who are not that, who are the opposite of that, who aim to unite, to invest in our people and to invest in unity, to call for unity. Completely outrageous, again, completely out of line. It's a scary trend, but it's one that we're going to have to confront. We cannot ignore. And, it sucks that it's in the political space, that this violent action has entered the political space, because this is politically protected free speech. We're allowed to say and support who we want. But let's remember this from my good friend Willie Nelson down here in Texas. The biggest gun we got is called the ballot box. So the ballot box will always prevail over any violence and any negativity and any ugliness like we've seen just this weekend with Speaker's husband.
I'm going to ask you this that's going to jump onto it. I got into my race March of 21. It took 2.5 weeks before I had death threats because I wanted people to have better healthcare access. It took 3 months before we had weird pickups driving slow in front of the house and everything else. Have you in your campaign experienced that? Have people come at you directly, or your family, or your office, or have you had to change security protocols and everything else to for you and your family?
No, I have not, and I'm fortunate, I guess. I've experienced them when I went to Beto events, Beto O'Rourke's rallies and stuff. We would get some protesters, and I've when I marched for our voting rights in Austin, there was a group of armed protesters that showed up, but none towards my campaign, none towards my rallies, none towards my office, none towards my staff. I'm grateful for that. I definitely want to keep them safe. They understand the risk of undertaking a campaign. If I would have told you at the beginning of this race that gun safety and a call for increasing the age on assault rifles and for calling and saying that I'd support an all-out assault weapons ban, I probably wouldn't have led with that at the beginning of this. But because of the situations and because of the circumstances at hand, I'm rising to the occasion to be a leader and saying, yes, I will stand with these families of Uvalde, and I will take a stand that might be a bit unpopular or maybe even seen as a bit extreme here in Texas because we have such an extreme gun culture here. But no, I have not. I think they've treated me with respect. I've treated everybody with respect. I tell them I'm not running to be part of the mob or the squad. I'm running to represent Texas values. With the district that I have to understand that half of it is very conservative, dark red, and very liberal, progressive, dark blue. And I've got to be the candidate that extends a handshake and an honest conversation to citizens throughout. So I'm ready to do that. And again, if I'm fortunate and I'm grateful that we've been treated with respect because we've treated folks that we've met, regardless of which side of the aisle they fall on, as Texans, as concerned Texans, as people that, again, everybody has something to be concerned about. And if it's about empowering their communities, keeping their children safe, keeping their relatives safe as they pray and as they shop, then I'm their guy, and I'm here for it. So yeah, no negativity on that aspect, and I'm grateful. And I think it's just because we treat each other, we've treated everybody that we've met with respect.
Okay, well, give us your 60-second summary, where people find you, how people give you money, and how people can best support you with 9 days to go.
Well, Lourin and Brent, I'm very appreciative to be on Dig on America. I mean, this is a kind of a bucket list opportunity for me. So thank you again. John Lira, we're running in the biggest, baddest congressional district in Texas, Texas 23. It's going to be poised for a photo finish. We know that we've put in the work. We've made the connections to do enough to cover the spread and to, like I said, to position ourselves for a photo finish victory 9 days from now. If you do want to help, there's still plenty of opportunity. We're still sending out a link to do some online text banking for us. If you wanted to help us out with a small contribution, liraforcongress.com. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at liraforcongress.com. Follow us, please. We're running a fun campaign. We have a great opportunity to do this, and it would be an honor to earn your support in this final stretch of this very critical race.
Excellent. Thank you, John. We want to thank you for coming on to the show, and I will kind of just leave just a quick thought this week for last thoughts on last call, and that is around the event that happened this past weekend and to the country at large. So early Friday morning, an intruder broke into the San Francisco home of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and bludgeoned her husband, Paul Pelosi, 82 years old, by the way, on the head with a hammer. And while details are scant, early indications suggest that the suspect, David DePapi, is an avid purveyor of anti-Semitic, QAnon, and MAGA conspiracy theories. Before the attack, this assailant reportedly shouted, "Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?" This is the United States of America in 2022, a country where political violence, including the threat of political violence, has become a feature, not a bug. And armed men are wearing tactical gear, face coverings, and patrolling outside ballot boxes in Arizona. Members of Congress are threatening to bring guns onto the House floor, or actually trying to do it, looking at you, Mr. Hot Wheels. Although he got voted out, so I guess it's okay. Prominent Republican members of Congress and their supporters on Fox News are stoking violence against political opponents by accusing them of being pedophiles, terrorists, groomers, or conspiring global cabals. Anti-Semitism. Thank you, Kanye West. The Jews replacing white people with immigrants. And of course, January 6th and subsequent efforts by Republicans and conservative media personalities to whitewash or even celebrate the events of that day. Pundits like that take refuge in this refrain that this is not who we are, but historically, it's kind of exactly who we are. Political violence is an endemic feature of American political history, and it goes right back to the Reconstruction of 1870s, where, lo and behold, Black people got the right to vote and used that power at the ballot box. As our guest John has already declared, the biggest gun we have is our vote. And so we have to answer and respond, not only to address the dangerous rhetoric that we are hearing on Fox News and Newsmax and others, and also elected members of Congress, we have to use our vote as our voice. In 9 days, America goes to the ballot. We go to vote. Do not let the threat of violence and intimidation tactics sway you from using your voice that people like my grandparents and my grandparents fought, marched, and died to use. Violence is never the answer. And in America, it shouldn't be the answer. And come January, when we swear in all the newly elected members of Congress like John, like the folks running in the Senate, and we have a new Democratic majority, we are going to ensure that this intimidation never happens again, hopefully with legislation. But that can only happen if folks like you exercise that right to vote. So that is my last thought on Last Call. We want to thank our special guest, John Lira, for coming on, talking with us about Texas politics. And I hope you guys have a good night and a good rest of the weekend. We'll see you here next week. Good night.
Thanks a lot, folks.